Hi there, welcome to the latest edition of the Gersnet Weekly Podcast, the independent Rangers podcast, which is brought to you by fans for fans, and where the content is absolutely free. It is also now the unofficial podcast of the Europa League finalists, and we'll have this pod is supposed to be more about Dundee United on Sunday than last night, but I think we genuinely need to focus on what happened last night because it was properly historic and all that kind of stuff. So we'll have a wee look at Saturday's game, and then we'll get into the bones about what happened last night. As I say every week, guys, it's not just a pod we do here at Gersnet. There's a website, there's forums, there's a history archive on the website, match reports, all that kind of stuff. Get yourself on there. Give us a wee like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. Give Frankie a follow, all that kind of a stuff. If you like what we do, put the word out there on social media, especially after last night, because I'm still buzzing. And my guest tonight is Stewart Weir, who has very kindly agreed to come on and chat with me again on a Friday night. But Stewart, before we get into the nuts and bolts of last night, how I normally do it is we focus on the night before the European game, and then we preview the game on the Saturday or the Sunday. I think we'll do it the other way about the night, right? So Rangers are playing Dundee United on Sunday. Do we care?
3 points would be great. Moving on.
The next point is: are you getting a game? Because I think I'm getting a game Sunday. I've got to go.
I've seen. Listen,
I think Frankie's in goals.
If he's in goals, there's hope for everyone.
Yep.
No, I mean, listen. It would take the biggest collapse in history for Celtic to give up on the league title at this stage. Rangers still have to contest as defending champions, but I think after last night's result, I think you're right in what you're saying. I think there's a kind of, that gif of Alan Partridge shrugging his shoulders and sort of like, I don't care.
Who cares?
Yeah, I think there's an element of that has quickly, been absorbed into the Rangers fan psyche, that there are bigger fish to fry on a European stage. As I say, I don't see Rangers giving up on it, but I do think the fact they're in two cup finals, it shows you, it gives you a measure of actually what this European final is about, when you actually have to remind yourself that Rangers are also in a Scottish Cup final.
A domestic final, yeah.
A domestic final. Now, given how long it's been since Rangers actually won the Scottish Cup, I remember sitting at Hampden in 1992 and think to myself, that's 11 years since Rangers won the Scottish Cup. This will never happen again. And lo and behold, it's even worse this time around.
Yeah.
But again, I'm not saying that the Scottish Cup final against Hearts has become incidental, but it's a measure of how important the game against Eintracht Frankfurt is going to be, that it's almost on the back burner.
Yeah, I mean, just one last sort of comment on Sunday's game against Dundee United, because we shouldn't dismiss it. It is still mathematically possible for Rangers to win the league, and given that the result last night and all the noise around Rangers and the excitement and the exposure and how they're feeling as well, because it must be a kick in the goalies to that mob over the road. If they were to drop points tomorrow, all of a sudden, I don't care what anybody says, they're already, in my opinion, slightly shitting themselves or majorly shitting themselves at the prospect of us winning the Europa League. If they were to drop points tomorrow, even just a draw, I think that could put some mild panic in the ranks.
I would err on the side of that being wishful thinking on your part.
Oh, not at all.
Yes, but no. I mean, I see what you mean, but I just think the last 24 hours, 48 hours, it's been kind of difficult to focus on anything else, simply because not only have the fans enjoyed this, a great many people in the Scottish media who had previously been quite keen to ignore everything that Rangers were doing under Giovanni Van Bronckhorst have suddenly had to sit up and take notice, probably because they want to justify a trip now to Spain.
Yep. There's one that I can think of is not mentioned or on at all on Twitter, and was all over it last night.
No, I again, without putting too fine a point on it, there's another gif out there about a dog doing something to your leg, and I think that's been the response by one or two people in the last, the last day to everything that Rangers did last night.
Yeah, and on to last night, a huge result. I mean, historic, really. It really was a historic night, and in some ways, given the last 9 years and where Rangers have been, quite an emotional night. Where I was in the Govan Rear, there were men close to tears where I was. It was really, really my best night at Ibrox, without a shadow of doubt. It'll take something to top that. It really will. So a huge result, and when you consider how this European campaign started, the Malmo game, and then we didn't get off to such a great start in the group stages. To reach the final is just an incredible achievement.
I don't really want to talk about the Malmo game. I spent too long on Twitter yesterday trying to explain to somebody that was not a qualifier. It was actually a knockout tie, and there is a difference. That it was knockout football, and Rangers lost it. You're right. The start was poor, but not only was it poor, it was also disappointing given the levels of performance that Rangers had managed to turn out over the last 4 or 5 seasons. And again, it was maybe a measure of this team about how much resolve they actually have, and how even when it was as bad as it was after those first 2 matches, they still had a desire and a passion to make a comeback, to actually to make the European campaign worthwhile. I'm not saying they knew they were playing themselves after losing the first 2. They were playing themselves into the knockout stages or anything like that, but it was a pretty horrendous start after the Champions League failure and then losing the first 2 matches. But they put it right, and they got it right, and they turned in some great performances to come through the group and into the knockout stages. And once they hit the knockout stages, I know people will say in cup competitions anything can happen, but I think this season with Rangers, there have been some monumental performances. Last night probably capped it off, but you also have to take into account the other performances that were in there. The performance away to Dortmund again, and I'm not saying that Rangers don't have a history or anything like that. Although for some people, a fledgling club making a European final after just 9 years must really stick in the craw.
Yeah, absolutely.
But and thus defeat a great many arguments, in one fell swoop. Being serious about it, performances from Rangers in Europe, I'm not saying you can number them in one hand, but they're really, really memorable ones. Not quite few and far between, but ultimately there's not really that many, especially away games. And I think that this season, with some of the performances, especially against Dortmund and against Leipzig last night, I think those will easily rank in any top 10 of Rangers performances on a European stage. I think they've been quite fantastic. And last night, I spent a while on Twitter yesterday. I made a comment about Leipzig. The atmosphere at Ibrox was incredible. I think some people are maybe a wee bit ignorant of just what the atmosphere can be like in German grounds as well. I didn't think at any point in time Leipzig were going to be unnerved by what they found at Ibrox in terms of the crowd. I think with Rangers it inspired them, I don't think Leipzig were intimidated. Hence the reason why they did 20 minutes where they really looked as if they could play Rangers off the park, scoring the goal. McGregor being forced into a great save. So, but all in all, beating a team that probably cost, 10 times, or probably maybe even 20 times what your team had cost, is just an amazing performance. You look at the breakdown of the Rangers team, and other than probably Goldson and Kent, there's not really any massively huge signings in that team. Yeah. And then you look at who Leipzig had, and it was like night and day. So again, that is another, not just the performance from Rangers, but the fact that they were punching way, way, way above their weight.
The thing that got me, everything about it was, the first thing that got me was everybody was in the ground really early. And I noticed that in the city centre. Honestly, I noticed that. I got into the city centre just about sort of 4:45, 4 o'clock. I went to meet Eck to do the sort of pre-match stuff, and we had a couple of pints and something to eat and all that kind of thing.
By the way, I'm looking forward to your next album, the two of you. Posing their favourite folk songs from your granny. I enjoyed that pose.
Aye, Mulligan and O'Hare. I've not quite forgiven Frankie for that one. But I noticed, like, normally when I finish work at that sort of time, I'm in the city centre and I go to get my subway tickets to avoid the queues, and it was mopped. Like the back of floor, St Edith subway station was really busy, and I thought, oh, this is a bit new. And when me and Eck were recording the show, you could see loads of Rangers fans queuing up to get into the subway, and I'm like, it's only like 4:30, 5 o'clock, and they're already making their way there. I got into the ground just after 7:30, and everybody was in, so it felt like a really, really big night. Obviously it was, but it really felt like a big night the minute you arrived. And I think when you consider that, you have to congratulate Van Bronckhorst here, because to go 3-4-3, to go man for man right at the start, to start with 3 at the back, 4 midfield, 3 up front, to ask Goldson, Bassett and Lundstrom to pick up those front 3, that was a ballsy move, and I think this is where Gio deserves credit. He's shown that he is a student of the game. He knows the game, knows the tactics, and he's prepared to be a bit brave. And that was a brave call. We didn't stay in that formation for the full night, but when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, this guy fancies it. He is going for this.
But I think, Colin, there was a case of him and having a Rangers team line up as they maybe normally would, and that might have played into the hands of Leipzig. I think his changes were twofold. One, it maybe threw Leipzig as to how Rangers were actually going to approach the game, and secondly, I think he'd have been open to criticism if Rangers had just gone 4-2-3-1 yet again, and the Germans had just played right through his side. There are times when I hear him being interviewed, and I realise that in his head he's thinking Dutch and translating to English, but there are so many phrases that he uses that it sounds like Dick Advocaat. The voice is different, but the sentiment's still the same. And in terms of, he sent a Rangers team out there and basically said, if you do X, Y, and Z and follow my instructions, as he put it, the game will come to you. And it did come. It came really, really quickly last night. Yeah. And again, I think that benefited Rangers greatly. The fact that they weren't still sitting after 60 minutes or 70 minutes looking to score a goal just to get back into the tie. They were actually in the driving seat. And I won't dwell on it. But if Haribo had made it 3-0, it took a bit for the eyes and the brain to work out what he'd actually done. because I thought he'd squaffed it and it was actually getting into the roof of the net, where actually it was just bouncing straight back up again. And, as I think I said in Twitter at half time, I don't think I felt that way about a missed opportunity since Billy Bremner missed against Brazil in the 1974 World Cup. It had been one that would have come back and haunted not just him, it would have haunted everybody who'd witnessed it or anybody associated with Rangers. But again, it 2-0 up, and then Rangers weathered a storm when the Germans scored and looked as if they could score again quite easily. And then the stuffing was knocked out of them when Lundstrom, Mr. now 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 in every game, man of the match candidate, whether it's in training or whether it's in European ties, turned up and hit a great winner. And just on him, I know we'll maybe go into a bit more detail with some of the other players. I don't think there's any coincidence that John Lundstrom has come on to a better game since Steven Gerrard left. I think there's an element of trust in John Lundstrom from Giovanni van Bronckhorst that wasn't there with Steven Gerrard and Gary McAllister. It was almost as if they were trying to ram a square peg into whatever hole, shape, size they made for him. Whereas I think with Giovanni van Bronckhorst, this is the role that I want you to perform or fulfill. This is your normal duties, but I want you to do this as well. And since he's been given that kind of freedom and also that kind of responsibility, the guy has just gone from strength to strength.
Yeah, undoubtedly. Another player we have to mention was the scorer of the first goal last night, Tav. 7 goals in the tournament, all in the knockout stages. And we talk about the journey that the club's been on and the supporters have been on, from sort of the way I've been saying it to focus from Stennismuir to Seville, I've been from the very bottom of Scottish football to now a European final. He was part of that journey. He came in when we were in the Championship. We weren't even in the top tier in Scottish football. There's been lots of doubts sort of cast upon him, including from myself, including from people, other contributors to this podcast. He's had real dark moments at times in terms of his performances and what he was doing. But his mental strength, he just seems to come through everything. And 7 goals in 4 knockout stages. Dortmund, Braga, Red Star last night. It's incredible. And from right back as well. I know he was a wee bit further forward last night, but certainly initially anyway. But 7 goals. I think he's now either the second or the joint top goal scorer in the tournament. It's just incredible. It's such a story.
But look at the last couple of seasons. All of a sudden, I think given the makeup of the team, there were certain things you didn't see happening. Rangers reaching a European final, you didn't see happening. Morelos becoming Rangers' record goal scorer in Europe. An amazing achievement. Okay, they've been playing a lot more ties, and because we're getting into group stages of the Europa League, there's maybe more opportunity there, and also the fact that we're coming through so many qualifying matches to reach the group stages, there's more opportunity. But that's an incredible achievement as well. But there's a bit of everything that Tavernier does. It reminds me of David Healy playing for Northern Ireland, when all of a sudden David Healy broke the record for the goals in qualifying and getting a special award from UEFA. Now, that was fine, because that was his job. That was his role to score goals. That's no Tavernier's job, but he's been doing it, and I'm not saying that Rangers have become reliant on him. Maybe the expectation level is that Tavernier will pop up and score a goal for you. And the fact it was the opener last night, I just think was, so typical of the kind of performances that he's put in over a long period of time now. I have never been convinced about him defensively, and you mentioned the dark moments there. I think he's got, touch wood, It doesn't happen the next couple of weeks. But I think he's got an error in him, a mistake in him, simply because positionally he's all over the place because he's trying to attack all the time. And the formation that Rangers played last night, interestingly enough, actually suited him and to an extent Barisic, and also the fact that Barisic could have been covered by Bassett going out wide. All of a sudden it looked as if Rangers had been playing for several months or maybe a couple of seasons using that 3-4-3 formation, because everybody seemed to know what their role was. And the other important thing was everybody covered them, covered each other. If somebody went forward or pushed up or came inside, somebody else filled that void. And I think that's why Rangers were in the tie for so long. And also I think that was the reason that Leipzig, it took them so long to actually have a go at Rangers, because they couldn't really work out where the gaps were that they could play in. It was only once they took possession of the ball for a good chunk of the second half that they started to look dangerous. But again, all credit to Giovanni Van Bronckhorst. You don't play for the Feyenoord under various coaches. You don't play at Ibrox under Dick Advocaat. You don't go to Arsenal. You don't go to Barcelona. You don't win 106 caps for the Netherlands with the coaches that you work under without learning something and picking something up. And I think, to that extent or to that end, I think Rangers have actually won a watch in terms of, appointing Van Bronckhorst.
The second goal, sure. Where I was in the stadium, I'm in the Govan rear. The minute it left Kamara's boot, and I mean the minute it left his boot, we knew it was in. You could see the trajectory of the ball. You could see where the keeper was. You knew there was too big a gap between where he was and where the ball was going. There's a couple of things I want to pick up in the goal. The one, I heard Scott Wright getting a bit of stick last night a couple of times, and I kind of pissed me off a wee bit because one, he's out there trying his best. You can argue that he's limited and all the rest of it, but one thing I think you always get out Scott Wright is his best. He's a willing player and he gives you everything he's got. Two, he's only there because of the injury situation, so you can't really have a go at the guy. You can't have a go at the manager for picking him because of the situation with injuries. But his involvement in that second goal was key because one, it was him that broke Leipzig coming forward. It was him that he won possession back, the turnover in possession. And it was him that set up Kamara. And it's good that I know he's a fringe player and all the rest of it, but it was good that he had that moment. And the second thing, and I didn't notice this until I got home last night and I sort of rewatched the game when I got home, Kamara's celebration, obviously aimed at Jimmy Bell, taking his black armband off and giving it a kiss. Brilliant moment. I mean, brilliant in respect that that's us, we're 2-0 up. But also you got a sense of what that man meant to the players. Yeah, and to do it when you were so tuned in and so focused on the job you were doing on the field, to score the goal and then instantaneously produce that celebration. I think there was a lot said this week. The players will be inspired by Jimmy Bell and everything. And you kind of, I'm not saying you take it with a pinch of salt. You sort of, you've kind of heard this before about certain games, but I think on that, just in that moment, I think you became acutely aware that there was a real togetherness within that team, and Bassey's celebration at the end as well, straight into the camera. I mean, again, there wasn't a player, and I know that maybe the questions were leading sort of questions, and what does this mean to you after the passing of Jimmy Bell? But the fact of the matter was, there were guys offering that up and saying that really brought us together. Even Lundstrom said it, and the goal that Kamara scored, I was pleased that Kamara scored it because I think he's one of these guys who, when he has a 5 out of 10 game, you notice it. Mm-hmm. I think it's very easy for you not to notice
the games where he's an 8 out of 10 because he does it so well. And I think him scoring that goal as well was just, it was apt that he would score the goal. Scott Wright as well. Different positions, different era, different generation. There's a bit about Scott Wright that if you go through other Rangers teams at different times, you'll see guys who might have struggled to win the fans over, but they were trusted and had won their managers over. I'll give you an example. You go back to the team that won the treble in '93. I made a few quid out of them, opening the scoring, and that was Neil Murray.
Neil Murray had that's all we were on.
Neil Murray. You saw teams, players picking team, or journalists picking team. This will be the Rangers team, and Neil Murray sometimes wasn't even on the bench in some of their teams. The thing is, he'd played something like 20 consecutive matches, starting away at the start of that season or earlier on in that season at I think it's Stranraer. He started in a League Cup tie, and he played it right back before he went into his right midfield. Walter Smith trusted him to play that specific role. Why? Because at that time he didn't really have anybody else, and I think Giovanni Van Bronckhorst is struggling because he's lost two main strikers. He's tried to utilise Aribo in that position, and it hasn't quite worked. He's tried to operate with Sakala in that position, and it hasn't quite worked. And he has used Scott Wright in that kind of role. And again, it's hit or miss maybe sometimes with Scott Wright. That's not his natural position. But I don't think anybody can fault either the part he played last night or the fact that he tries 100% of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt a wee bit for Alan McGregor last night after that save. It was a great save, a fantastic save, and he's done it so often in these games. To then, 30 seconds later, to concede the goal, I think it was a sore one. But we've turned it around, and
it was a great finish.
It was a good finish. No doubt.
That was an absolute belter of a finish. And the fact that if you look at the English papers today, this guy's going to Man United, going to Arsenal for 60 million quid. That's what he's capable of. So McGregor will have been upset because he hasn't kept a clean sheet and he's been beaten. But that touch would have beaten just about every goalkeeper in the world.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. I felt for him because he kept us in it, and then there's that great finish. But we turned it around and on to Lundstrom's winner. And I think Ryan Kent deserves a special mention here because he was involved in the first, and he was involved in Lundstrom's winner. Cross into the box, keeper passes it out, and he just strokes it home. I mean, we were talking earlier on about how vital and how sort of he's been a major player throughout this whole run. It's almost like it was written in the stars that he was going to. If we were going to get through last night, he was going to be the guy that got the winning goal.
Yeah, there was a bit of that. But just to go back to touch upon Ryan Kent, and I've mentioned it on here several times over. Ryan Kent comes in for criticism sometimes because it doesn't quite work for him, but he never hides. He never hides or feels sorry for himself. He always looks for the ball, always. And whether he's taking up a wide position or whether he's coming inside or whatever he's trying to do, at least he's trying to do something. At least he's trying to take the team forward.
Yeah.
And that is worthy of praise, regardless. You're right. I mean, it was heart and mouth moment again when all of a sudden it's a goal check, and you're thinking to yourself, Sakala didn't touch anybody. The goalkeeper clattered his own player, sort of type thing. You couldn't see anything. But, and I'll mention this just now, but given the levels of officialdom that we saw last night, there was much, and the performance, especially the referee, that you had to put a question mark against just about any decision the guy was making. He's booked 2 Rangers players early on, and then let an absolutely hideous tackle on Kent go unchallenged. And if you look at it, it looked a sort of bad tackle. When you see it from the other angle, he's basically chopped him off at the knees. Now, I think over the week, in terms of the European games that I've watched, the highlights and all the rest of it I've watched, I just hope that Rangers are through to a final that is not going to be spoiled by the inconsistencies of the referees. You saw with Manchester City that, Real Madrid could have been down to 10 men in the first half, and it didn't happen. And you saw 1 or 2 decisions as well in the West Ham game, and you just think to yourself, surely Rangers, big dream isn't going to be spoilt by a referee or officials who are just completely incompetent. And I don't think that referee was up to much last night.
I know, I would agree with that. Absolutely agree with that. No, sure. Well, me and you are going to have a disagreement here because you've already mentioned that you didn't think that the atmosphere would sort of spook Leipzig and all the rest of it. I have to disagree. I think the supporters played their part last night. I see Tedesco's quote. He was quoted today saying the atmosphere contributed its part. I have to say it's the best atmosphere I've ever experienced in a stadium anywhere. It was crazy, electrifying. And as I was saying earlier on at the start of the show, it is the best atmosphere I've ever experienced. As a night at Ibrox, I think I've topped it. I'm approaching 50. However many years I've got left on this planet, I don't think I'll get a better night than that last night. And I think it played its part. I think you're right. I think it inspires Rangers, but I also think my argument here is if you're doing your job and 50,000 people are screaming at you while you're doing it, then of course it's going to have an impact. If I'm sitting in an office and there's 50,000 people screaming at me while I'm doing it, you think, oh my God, they're screaming at me. I know it's.
You think you're in the wrong office.
I'm always in the wrong office. I just think it must have an impact. And I suppose the point I'm trying to make is that atmosphere last night was incredible. And I don't care what anybody says. It was the 12th man. We as supporters played our part last night.
It probably was the 12th man for Rangers, but my point would always be that once you reach a certain level in football, I don't think it matters how intimidating the crowd is. You can say, yeah, I've never heard a crowd like that. I've never seen a crowd behave like that. I've never felt that kind of, tension or, you can be impressed by it. But I do honestly believe that the top players are just taking it in their stride. And another, maybe to do a kind of long discussion once upon a time with Graham Souness. But Graham Souness said, show me a supporter that scored a goal. And I think he's right in what he says there. I think, as I say, I don't think Leipzig were intimidated. I think when they got into their A game, Rangers were toiling. I mean, great performances it was from Rangers and scoring 3 goals. There were times last night where a clearance, a big punt up the park was actually celebrated because Rangers were under so much pressure. Do I think the crowd inspired Rangers? Absolutely. I think if you're playing at home and you're getting that kind of level of support, it sometimes, and again, I could get into another argument, sometimes makes you wonder, where's that fanatical support when you're toiling against Motherwell on a Saturday? So to that end, we could have a long discussion in that one. But no, I agree. The support levels last night were just absolutely incredible, and for the opposition manager and other people to come out and say they've never experienced anything like it, absolutely fantastic. But it's fans don't really blow the ball into the net, and to say that they were the 12th man, I think it's taking a wee bit away from the other 11 guys on the pitch who are actually doing the job.
Oh, Stewart, scathing. Anyway,
that's not because you want an office with 50,000 folk. I want to see.
I just want credit for shouting them home last night. That's all I'm looking for. The journey that the Rangers have been on over the last 9-10 years. There's been a long period of time over the last decade that it was hard being a Rangers supporter, really hard. I can remember Annan at Ibrox, Annan Athletic beating us. I think they beat us 2-0. One of the few occasions I left the ground early, I was at Forfar the day they put us out the League Cup. I was at Easter Road the day that Wraith Rovers beat us in the Petrofac final, and there were so many hard days in that sort of period where it just didn't feel like fun being a Rangers supporter anymore. You thought, and there were times, I'm not going to deny it, but I thought, well, that's it. It's gone. We're never really going to recover from this. It's too big a thing that's happened to the club to fully recover. And even when we go back into the top tier, in 2017, was it? When we go back into European football under Pedro, you had the whole Progress Niederkorn thing. Even at that point, that was 4 years ago. I'm like,
lack of progress Niederkorn.
Exactly. You're just like, it's done. We're never really, even although we're back in the top tier, we're never going to be back at that sort of high level again. And so for 4 years, for 10 years after, 2012 and everything that happened then, 4 years after Niederkorn, to be in a European final. Fucking someone saying it. Honestly, I know that. As I was saying that, then I was like, European final, that does not compute. It's an incredible story. It is one of the best sporting stories in the last 30, 40 years, in my opinion.
The thing about Rangers and where they found themselves, playing against clubs they had never been previously introduced to, that I remember going to a game. It was a Sunday afternoon. I think it was Rangers and Montrose. I think Rangers won 4-1, and I was there with my son Colin, and he turned to me. He must only have been about 8 or something like that, 7, and turned to me and said, "This is rubbish, isn't it?" And he was right. It was, and going back to where Rangers found themselves. You thought, well, Rangers will come back from this, and then you kind of go through your own personal history, and you look at teams that you remember as being big teams, especially in England, who I'm not saying vanished without trace, but you look at the likes of where Blackpool once were and how long it took them to get back. You look at Nottingham Forest just now and where they still find themselves. I mean, there's a game on just now, Sunderland and Sheffield Wednesday. You look at, everybody will say, they're huge teams, big teams. They're big teams, big stadium, big fan bases. But if you get yourself into a rut and you struggle with either recruitment or results just going against you, it could take you a while. Yeah. And I always thought that Rangers would get back to a certain level, but even as you rightly point out, even when they did come back into the top flight, even just a couple of years ago, under Pedro Caixinha and under Warburton and under various other, well, I was going to say Murty times about 4 or 5 or whenever it was he was filling in. Some of the performances there, you did not see anything like last night, even in the horizon. No. And I'll maybe be controversial again. There were times under Steven Gerrard you did not see that kind of performance or the performance levels since the turn of this year. You did not see that because Rangers could have fantastic stats of 70%, 75%, 80% possession and not create anything out of it. So to suddenly find themselves in a position where they're putting all of this together, I think it's just incredible. One thing I will say before it goes out my head, they've beaten 2 absolute crack German teams from the Bundesliga in terms of Leipzig and in terms of Dortmund. I don't think David Moyes or his coaching staff wrote off Eintracht Frankfurt I think maybe their fans thought it'd be easier than it turned out to be. I think elements of the media as well. Eintracht Frankfurt, after a couple of weeks after the transfer window, just decided they were going to finish mid-table. They weren't going to get into the European or the Champions League places, and pulled up the undercarriage, not to make a crash landing, but basically concentrate on the Europa League. And that's what they've done. And people say, "Oh, they've got no home for them." They've just been treading water in their league matches. The performances you really need to look at is what they've done in the Europa League. Hence the reason why they're in the final. They are nobody's mugs. They are a very effective and a very efficient team. They might not have the out-and-out superstars that some of the German outfits have, but nevertheless, they are a very good unit. I wouldn't go with their league position. I think this will be a far tougher game than it looks if you just look at the relative league positions or look at the performance levels that Rangers have produced. I hope Rangers don't take their eye off the ball. I can't see that happening under Giovanni van Bronckhorst anyway. But I think that there's a warning there to be had, and I think it'd be Rangers would do well to heed that.
Final point for tonight, Stuart. I mean, for the supporters, including myself, it's now about planning the journey and all that kind of thing. I've got a decision to make, and I need to make it quickly because my son can't make it because he's got exams that week. So I'm in a sort of conundrum. Do I go and just leave him here, or do I stay with him? Because I've watched every game with him, every round of this competition.
I'll be your son.
We've either been at Ibrox. You
take me with you. I don't buy you beer.
you can if you can get the tickets. That's a deal, Stuart. But I mean, this is what it's like. This is the good part of being a supporter, especially again going back around the journey that we've had over the last 10 years. No Rangers supporter would have thought that they would be planning, a trip abroad for a European final, even a year ago. You know what I mean? It's just, it was unheard of. So, it's great times to be a Rangers fan. I know domestically, in terms of the league, it went a bit south. But, I mean, that last night felt better than any league win I've ever experienced at Ibrox. I have to say, the thought of travelling to Seville to see Rangers in a European final, it's just, I mean, again, I'm struggling to say it because it's just so good.
I mean, it's. I think actually this might, for a great many fans, this might feel like a European final, whereas Manchester felt like it was a European final, but there was a kind of, how can I put it, almost a testimonial feel to it. Even though there was like 200,000 Rangers fans there, it still had that feel. All you'd done was drive down the road.
Yeah.
And again, I sympathise with you. My middle daughter Louise was sitting I think it was higher maths on the Thursday, and she had her bed in the back of the car the way up the road, just so but I don't think she slept very much. She did quite well in her exam as well, I have to say. But it was like, you try and prioritise. My take on that was, and this is why I appear on the BBC's Bad Parent Club. My take was, you could always sit your higher maths again. You might not see your Rangers in the European final again.
Yeah.
And I think she would have regretted not actually being there for the final as well. So I completely get what you're saying and sympathise with the sort of conundrum you're finding yourself in just now. But ultimately, I think this is maybe an opportunity that's too good to miss. And just one last point: the amount of times I heard on radio today that this is Rangers' first European final in 14 years, as if
that's a bad thing.
No, it's almost as if, 14 years, how long does it take them? When in the very next bit of their bulletin, they're making reference to clubs that have never played the Champions League. They've never get anywhere near the knockout stages of European competition. But because of their, by dint of birth, they suddenly find themselves playing in the richest league in the world, they're suddenly better than Rangers, and dare I say it, Celtic are, simply because they'll earn 90 million quid this season for not being very good. You know, that did, you know, I won't say it upset me today, but it was kind of like, I kept looking at the radio and thinking to myself, what are you on about? You know, Rangers, and again, did I see it coming? No. Did I think that Rangers, 14 years, especially with everything, you know, that has befallen Rangers in the interim period, did I ever think they would get back to a European final? Maybe someday, but maybe that I wouldn't be here. The fact that they've actually made it is just quite incredible. And congratulations to Rangers, and congratulations to Giovanni Van Bronckhorst for picking up the pieces. And congratulations maybe to Steven Gerrard for setting the ball rolling. Although I did think the wee sort of cartoon that was going around this afternoon saying, about you know, lifting a European trophy, how does it compare to finishing the 13th in England's top flight? I thought that was a wee bit cheeky from some folk, although I did laugh at it. But nevertheless, it's been a long journey. But interestingly, it seems as if rather than running out of petrol, they're now starting to put a bit of their sort of the foot down and accelerating through this season, and the final should be good. Should be great, in fact. Hopefully.
I mean, I've struggled to keep the smile off my face all day. I must admit,
you're on your fifth bag of lemons. I mean, you cut them in half every half hour and sucking on it to try and look as sure-faced as you normally do.
I went to get my hair cut today, right? And the guys that cut my hair, Brian, they're Rangers men, right? The two brothers are Rangers men, and so as I walked in, they're giving us a bit of banter. And there's this guy, it's one of the barbers where he just sit and wait to get shouted up, right? And the guy next to me had a face as long as Shergar, right? He looked really down. And the minute everybody started talking about the game, he put the headphones on and just sort of, and I was like, oh, I know what team you support, big man.
Falkirk,
it was brilliant. It was brilliant. But I mean, a great night, and it's one we should celebrate, especially, you know, considering where we've been over the last 10 years. And I look forward to the final. Whether I'm there or not, we'll find out. But there'll be plenty of Rangers fans there, you know, whether I'm there or not. And just great for everybody, and really looking forward to it.
I don't see the mode of transport. I remember driving down to Manchester on the Wednesday morning and overtook a train on the back of a low loader that was full, a big diesel locomotive that was full of Rangers fans with their scarves hanging out the window. I don't see them, you know, using the same mode of transport to get to Seville. But it'd be, I think it'll be trains, planes, and automobiles.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, there was one or two sort of texts on the WhatsApp group that did make me chuckle, that somebody had worked out the easiest way to get there was to fly to Tangiers and then get a bus. I mean, I'm not sure how many weeks that might have taken. I was like, just parachute me into the desert in Libya and I've got a couple of camels. But no, I mean, I think it'll be trains, planes and automobiles this time.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Right, Stuart, we'll need to wrap it up there. So big thanks to Stuart, as always, for his contribution on this special occasion. It is a special occasion, there's no doubt about it. We were live tonight, guys. It was Friday night, but the pod will be available to download and stream on a variety of platforms from tomorrow, including Acast, iTunes, YouTube, Castbox, Stitcher, Spotify, all the usual places. We'll have a show out on Sunday night. I'll just have a wee look here who's on. It's Ross who's hosting. Big thank you to Ross last night. He bought me dinner and he never even let me know. He just sneaked off and paid the bill. He had to get the Ibrox before me, and when we went to pay the bill, he'd already covered it. Top man, that man. So he's hosting on Sunday night. Ian Duff's on, and Patrick's on as well. So join in on 9:30 on Sunday night. They'll obviously be covering the Dundee Utd game and probably more of this chat as well. You know, Europa League final and all that. So, guys, it's been an incredible 24 hours. I'm still high as a kite. I don't know if you've noticed. I'm buzzing. If you could bottle and sell what I'm feeling right now, you would be a fucking millionaire. Absolutely no doubt.
You also might do 13 years in jail.
Maybe, who knows? But you know what? You would enjoy it because you would be as high as a kite.
You've got pals.
So enjoy the weekend. Enjoy the game on Sunday. And remember and tune in on Sunday night on the YouTube. So until the next time, guys, bye for now.
All the best, folks.